Hey, y'all. I wanted to take a moment to jump on here. Have you ever had those days where, especially if you're a coach or you're doing deeper work, you work with clients and, some kind of capacity, whether you're training, coaching, consulting, do you ever find that sometimes you have the same theme that shows up throughout the day? Hey, Vani. And so it's interesting to me because today was one of those days. It was the same theme showed up with two different clients. And so it prompted me to want to jump on here and talk a little bit about what those conversations were, as I think there's some really good nuggets to pull out of that. And so some of you know, I've been doing a lot of work going deeper in my own study and contemplation around human design. I've been spending the last 5 years just going down some really beautiful rabbit holes and working with some different coaches who have just been phenomenal in opening up a different way for me to access understanding of my own wiring, but also in helping my clients understand theirs as well. And many of you know, I also had a program that launched a couple weeks ago to bring what I was doing with my one-on-one clients to a larger capacity. So loving that, and a lot is showing up as a result of creating these activation spaces and really creating an opportunity to introduce people to what human design can help you do. And so first and foremost, a little backstory for me, one of the things that's been really amazing through this process is the ability to give myself permission to be myself. And what I mean by that is there's so many ways I think we get perception kind of put on us, or we're conditioned, or we're programmed, or we think we need to be performing or showing up the same way as someone else. And oftentimes this creates an incredible amount of resistance, and it creates this space that makes us feel like we're not in our body. We're kind of out of the game. It just doesn't feel right. And there's a reason for that, because our natural energy isn't aligned to that. And so through human design, while it's not something that puts you in this box that says this is who you are, it is an opportunity for you to assess and consider what something might mean for you based on where you're at in your life at any given point. So the very essence of contemplation, right? You get to understand, and my mom's dog's going crazy, so apologies for that. Ammo. So you get to decide what that might look like for you. And I will say, as I've done this work, really deep work over the last 5 years, some of the things that I've understood about my own wiring has changed. And so it's been interesting as I've worked with my one-on-one clients, I have been bringing this information real time as I've been digging in, and we have been exploring and going through my clients' human design as well. And so I do this with the leaders I work with the business owners, with the teams I work with. It's really powerful to see some of those dynamics play out. And it takes anything you've ever done as an assessment to a whole nother level, because this isn't an assessment. It's really a holographic energy blueprint of your natural wiring. So it shows you your superpowers, your innate gifts, and all of that. Well, anyway, back to what happened today. So I was with two different clients today. One, a client that I'm re-engaging with, another client that I've been working with. And one of the things that showed up today was some things around the ego center. And so I have a running joke with my clients who have dug in to human design on a deeper level, that while the ego center, and I'll show you, I'll put my chart up for a minute. While the ego center is the smallest little center on your chart, it's this little, and you can see on mine, it's white. Ammo. You can see it's white on mine. It means it's undefined or open on my chart. I do not have a consistent way I move energy, but this little itty bitty guy, in my opinion, is the biggest axe kicker around sometimes. And so while it looks like the smallest center out of the 9 centers on your chart, for me personally, and I would say probably 50% of the population, that can be the biggest ass kicker. And so it is in the space of your ego. And it's also known as the heart center or your willpower center. And why I say that 50% of you may be relating to this is because 50% of the population has either, hold on one second, ammo, has either, sorry about that, has either a undefined, which means they have maybe a gate or two defined in there, but they have no channels connecting from their ego center back to any other center. Or they have a fully open, where it means they have nothing defined. And so when you have an open or defined area in your chart, it means you do not have a consistent way that you are moving energy. You are actually absorbing you are actually absorbing and amplifying the energy around you, which is a big place for where we get programming, conditioning, the shoulding, comparisonitis, like all of the stuff that jacks us up oftentimes comes from our open areas, because what that is there for us to do is to actually heal those shadows that are showing up in some of the defined areas, but it's also allowing us the ability to discern how we choose to show up in those spaces, how we choose to take energy in and move energy. So we have a real energy around the power to decide, the power of choice. And so I look at some of the open centers, while they can be the ones that kick you in the ass the most, for sure. I mean, my open head and my open ajna definitely give me some things to run for my money. And my ego, like I said, that little itty bitty area where it's all about that space of willpower, that space of value, that space of knowing your worth. And so if you're one of the 50% of the people that has an open or undefined, my guess is that there are periods in your life or currently where you have struggled with knowing your own value and knowing your own worth. You have also probably found yourself in a space where you have believed that you have had to prove something, that you have had to be validated or gain approval from something outside of yourself. And so if you have an undefined or open ego center, you are probably in that space. Hey, how's it going, K-Hop? If you are in that space where you have that open or undefined area, you have probably felt that storyline show up for you. And you've bumped against that idea of not knowing your own value. And so perhaps if you are an entrepreneur, you have undercut the value of what you're offering, which means you slashed your prices, or you're overly discounting things, or you're begging people into your programs, or thinking you have to give things away for free. Or when you do charge what you're worth, you give away everything in the farm because you keep thinking you need to prove that the value that you're bringing to the table is legit. And so those of us, and I say this from someone who has experienced this myself, I have one gate defined, and it's the gate I'm going to talk about today, because this is what showed up when I was doing some coaching with clients earlier this morning and over lunch, is this idea around, so what are the shadows that show up when we have this undefined area, when we have a defined gate? What are the things that are showing up for us sometimes in the way that we either react or have sort of this repressive energy that we're putting out because the fears are showing up, the surface, the thing that says I'm not worth it, I've got to prove something, I've got to put myself out there. And so for instance, I was in conversation with my clients today, and we were talking about this need for control. And so if any of you are my fellow recovering control freaks, you might have a defined gate 21 showing up in your ego. And I must say, guilty as charged. That is the only gate that is defined for me. My ego is gate 21. And the shadow of gate 21 is all about the need for control. And so this is very much that energy, especially in the reactive form of this, the reactive space of the shadow is all around that need to control. Hey, Jim, that need to control, that need to be in the driver's seat for everything. And so as a recovering control freak myself, and I say recovering because there are definitely times that I still bump up against this, because here's the beautiful thing. And I say beautiful thing because it took me a while to understand this. A beautiful thing about the shadows that show up. It is not, the shadows are not here for us to like finally get rid of and like move past and think that they're just going to go away. The shadows are here as a tool to continue to guide us to step into the light and open up the innate gifts that is the polar opposite in the other side of that. So if the shadow of the gate 20, if 21, the shadow is control, the gift that shows up when we start to understand that, we start to recognize that, we contemplate that, we have the awareness, we can open up and allow ourselves a different path. We step into the gift of what's called authority. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. And then there's the CD, which is the higher consciousness, which is like you were in the purest state. You were like really fully dialed in, aligned as fuck. And you were like in that space where it is just like people just feel the essence of you. And the CD of this gate is called valor, which is about the courage of what it takes to be a leader who is fully surrendering and allowing the authority to guide them. And so I just thought it was really interesting because as I was working with clients today, this came up multiple times. And so we started talking about this need to control the outcomes, to control the directions, to control someone else, whether it's their response, what they're doing, how they show up. And so again, if you're someone that's really struggled with some of that kind of control freak energy, and again, guilty as charged, you may have that gate 21 that's defined in your chart, which means you have an energy that when the shadow is showing up in the repressed state, you become very submissive. In the reactionary state, you become that control freak. And so thinking about where that might show up for you, right? And sometimes we bump against it because that happens to be the energy going on around us, or we're with somebody else. If we have the open gate there, we're with somebody that has a defined gate, we may be amplifying their energy as well. So even if you're not someone who's in that control freak energy a lot, you may have experienced it based on either what's going on in the transits around you or experienced it from someone else and have taken on that energy for yourself. For those of you that had that defined space, you probably know what I'm talking about. And so it's this space of understanding that when we feel we need to control, we are actually creating an imbalance that again is having us push or pull in one way or another. Because what happens is when we allow ourselves to be in the gift of that gate, so the authority, there's actually this beautiful balance between yin and yang. There's this beautiful balance between feminine and masculine energy. And sometimes that can feel, looking from the outside in, like a very submissive stance to take. When actually, when in alignment, it's a space where you're in pure authority for yourself. And there is a knowing that says, I know when to allow life to guide me. I know when to allow, this is the feminine energy that says I can receive guidance and the push and pull naturally with where life is sort of moving me or navigating me, with the masculine energy that says I want to be able to direct some of that energy in this way. And so we need this healthy balance as both. And many of you may have heard me talk about this before. We are moving into an energy, and some of you can feel this really powerfully right now, where we are moving away, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like that. We're moving away from this control over and creating more of this control within, or the way I talk about it is power over versus power within. When we create this collective power, what happens is we're surrendering to the authority of what is guiding us and pulling us forward. We're also surrendering in a space of service to others to engage in a different way, that we're looking at the will of the entire collective community. And so what I think is really interesting about this is we go from a space of in the shadow for gate 21, we go from a space that says, I need to be in control. I got to take the reins. I'm going to drive this my way or the highway, come hell or high water. And we all know leaders, and again, guilty. I've been in this space before. I definitely am a recovering control freak in many aspects of my life. I like things to be just so. There is a risk when things are not going the way I want. And so learning the art, and I will say there's an art to it, learning the art of surrender. Learning the art of being still and contemplating the resonance of what might be coming through with wherever you're at, and understanding what that means in terms of your own authority as a leader. And so I want to put this in kind of a leadership context for just a minute, because what I think about is one of the things I love when you really get in and study, the shadow and the gift and the seedy, that higher level consciousness, is it talks about the opportunity that when you are standing, or when you are aligned in the gift of that gate, that it is creating a space of true resonance. It is creating a space of the fact that when you're in true authority, you are actually inspiring a sense of loyalty within the group and communities that you serve. Because the authority side of, or the gift side, which is the authority of this gate, is all about how I can be of service. So think about that for a minute. And for those of you that have that defined gate, I want you to think about that for a minute. Where have you led from a space of trying to control And sometimes I think that's an oxymoron, right? Because we say things like, oh, they're leading from fear. Okay, that's not possible, because real leadership does not come from fear. Real leadership comes from a place of, and what I love is the higher level consciousness is all around valor, which is that courageous space to say, I understand when I need to allow the flow to be and when I need to take the reins and sort of guide things in a different direction, right? There's that balance. And only in that balance, or only in full surrender, can we achieve that balance of that yin and yang, that masculine, that feminine, that give, that take, that receive, that drive, that flow that says I'm allowing, and that framework that says I'm doing, only when we're in a space where we surrender, and surrender not only to our own authority, surrender to others within the community that we're serving, and surrender to our higher power, the universe, God, source, Tao, whatever it may be. And so when you think about real surrender, that's where real authority lies. It's in the knowing that all is being taken care of. It's in the knowing that says, I don't need to control anything. I need to stand in my own innate personal power and know, and this goes back to the whole ego center, and know that I am worthy and know that I am valuable, because know that I can direct and lead simply from a place of authority and knowing. And that in by doing that, in that true sense of authority, I actually inspire loyalty among the ranks. And so I think about, feel that for a minute. Feel the difference between, I got to control this. I'm going to drive this my way. Everybody needs to get on board and this ship is going in this direction, right? How many times have you heard that? You know, get on the bus. We're going this direction. It's my way. It's the highway. There's a lot of that energy, right? And that's very much in the shadow of somebody feeling the fear of, I don't feel enough, therefore I've got to get my arms around it and almost strangle it. So think about when you're in that control energy, when you're in the shadow of this gate, that energy feels very stifling. It feels as if you are like suffocating something. And most times it feels like you're suffocating yourself, even though you think, when we think we have a semblance of control is usually when we feel like things are spiraling out of control the most, because the tighter we hold on, the tighter we feel we got to hold on. And we keep contracting and contracting and contracting instead of allowing ourselves to release and allow the movement to be what it needs to be. And so it was really interesting because as I touched upon this with a client earlier today, first of all, we talked about, I'm just curious, do you feel the resonance of needing to prove yourself? And of course, it got very emotional for her as we were going through this. And then when I met with another client, he got almost as emotional having the same conversation, because these are two areas that oftentimes, especially if you have a lot of defined areas in your chart, I only have 3 centers that are open in my chart, which means I have a lot of consistent energy and I have a lot of ways I just show up, and there's still things I can learn through it. And there's blocks and there's all kinds of stuff in that. And I'm going to get to that later. I'm going to be introducing something next week. If you are really interested in learning more about your own human design, we're going to go deep in all of this. But the open centers are our areas for biggest introspection. They are our areas for biggest learning, for biggest growth. They are also the areas that we are here to teach and to lead from. And so when I look at all of what I've hit against in my ego center, and particularly in this gate 21, like I said, it's the only one. And again, for those of you that jumped on late, when you look at the chart, it's this little itty bitty guy right here. It looks white. I'm trying to put point and show you. It's a little small center and it's got a lot of power. For those of you that have a defined ego, you have a very strong sense of knowing your own worth. You have a strong sense of value. You are also somebody who has an incredible amount of willpower, that when you take on a new habit, you probably can just take it on just because it sounds like something to do. Like the word habit is exciting to you. For those of you, the 50% of us that do not have a defined ego, the idea of taking on something and having willpower, we can will something all day long and oftentimes find ourselves falling flat or falling off. Whatever it will get really, this is why New Year's resolutions don't work for a lot of people, because they're like, I'm going to do this. And they have an open ego and their willpower is like, yeah, why? Because for me, if there's not a resonance as to why, something really matters and what am I going to gain by doing that thing, me doing it for the sake of doing it is not going to happen. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I don't have willpower. I can't rely on will to motor through something. I don't have that consistent energy. I can borrow it from other people, or I can connect it to my solar plexus, which is my passion, my emotion, which is how my whole authority comes from. So I could connect it to a big, powerful why, and it's lighting me up. Totally different. I can do habits when it's connected to that. When it's a habit for the sake of the habit, yeah, it'll last about 3 days and then I get distracted or bored or something happens. And it's just not something that is a natural way for me to show up. And so I say that because when I recognize that, my sister, for instance, we have very similar profiles in terms of we're both 6'2" emotional manifesting generators. Yet I have an open ego and she has a defined ego. And so one of the things that I'll share is she's run like 8 marathons. Me, the idea of running this, that doesn't even make sense to me. I ran when I played soccer because there was a whole objective to it. I don't run to run. Running is like, it's a space for her that actually calms her down. She loves the discipline of it. Well, she has a willpower and a consistent access for tapping into that. So of course it makes sense for her. Well, if I think I've got to show up and do what she's doing and wonder why I keep failing, it's because I'm not wired. I don't have the same access to energy that she does in that space. So when you understand that, it becomes very powerful. So again, back to the gate 21 for a minute, which is this whole space of needing control and learning the path of surrender. And I will tell you, and this is particularly hit during the 5 years that I've done my study in human design, but even more particularly since the pandemic and some of the things that I have pushed up against with some of my other open areas and some of my stuff that has definitely been here to teach me some things, is to really allow myself to let go of control and control in all aspects of my life. And so really learning to sit with what surrender really looks like. And so I think it's easy sometimes for us to talk about, oh, I'm surrendering. Yet we're still trying to control something. And many of you may have heard me use the analogy that we trust Amazon more than we trust God or the universe. And because we're constantly trying to tell the universe how it needs to happen. Or we're like, we don't believe that what we put in motion is actually going to afford us whatever we are trying to open up access to. Or we don't trust that we are fully supported or that we're enough or that what we're doing is valuable. And we keep going out trying to prove something. Again, there's that aspect of control. Mine shows up as a control freak. My need to prove, my need to validate has many times shown up. And now I'm going to take the steering wheel back and I'm just going to drive this ship, right? Instead of real surrender, which says, I trust the authority that is guiding me. I trust. There is a trust. There is a courage that comes in surrender. And so I just think it was really interesting because twice today in 2 very different conversations in very different contexts, this was something that showed up, and it showed up very powerfully for both my clients. And it showed up in a way that got them thinking about, how do I rewrite that story? So if this is a space that is kind of like knocking me out, if it's a space that I keep feeling that need to want to prove myself, how can I rewrite that story? And one of those things is getting into a space where you start to really feel and believe that I am worthy just because. And so if you have that open area, it's how do you turn that so that you can be in a space to say, I am enough. Hard stop. What I have to offer the world is of high value. Hard stop. And I love Amanda Francis. I do a lot of work, again, because some of our money stuff comes from the ego center, our sales stuff, a lot of the beliefs and the programming that we have around that comes from this ego center. I love that Amanda Francis has a way that she says what I have to offer, because I do a lot of her work, again, clearing out my money stories, clearing out my need to think I have to prove or validate the value of what I have to offer. It's been something that I have worked on my entire life in various aspects, and now get to be in a position where I get to teach that and share that to others. She talks about how you can reframe that to say for yourself, I know that what I have to offer the world is of massive value, and I deserve to be compensated for that value as well, right? And I'm paraphrasing how she says that, but I deserve to be because I'm here, right? There's no justification that's required. There is no validation. There's no approval. There's nothing you have to prove in order to be worthy of what is calling you forward in your gifts and in your magic and in the innate gifts that you're here to serve. So and again, if you feel like this is something that's resonating for you, any aspect of it, either the open or undefined ego or this specific gate 21 that's all around control, if you're feeling a resonance with that, I offer that you give yourself space to think about this, and think about it in a way where you're not concentrating on it, but think about it in a way where you're allowing yourself to just sort of marinate, contemplate, play with the idea of it to see how and where that might be resonating for you. And if it is showing up and having any kind of resonance for you, how might you flip the script? And how might you allow yourself to feel into, and I say feel into because it really is something that's a visceral thing within your body, feel into what surrender might look like or feel like in that space. What would it feel like to surrender to the knowing of your own inner authority, the authority of the guidance around you from a universal perspective, to trust that you are here to lead and guide in a way that actually inspires this loyalty from others from a place of service? And I just think about how cool is that? I mean, think about what a reframe, right? When I think about all of that energy and that control freakness that I used to really be in and sometimes still find myself in, let's be honest, versus I am here to serve the collective will of the community. By the way, those of you with a gate 21, sometimes you are the people that feel like you take on a lot of extra responsibility. It's because you do. You are here to affect the will of the collective. And so when you think about, I can do that by forcing, which is never going to get me as far as I want. It doesn't. When we force, when we push, when we control, we're missing a lot of opportunity for the magic that can come through, versus when I surrender and I allow myself that balance, that space of being in that truest place of authority where I am here to serve. Therefore, I surrender to the others around me. I surrender to all that I think needs to be. I surrender to the outcome. I surrender to my attachments. I surrender to any of the codependent cycles that I've created. I surrender. And I really feel into what surrender can look like for me. Then I begin to feel the authority of what it means to be in the gift of that gate, so that I can inspire that loyalty of the community I'm here to serve. And so I just think about how cool that is. I think it's really awesome how that showed up with my clients today. And I love how the last piece of that, the higher consciousness, is all around, do you have and I love the way it says this in Gene Keys, you as a leader must have great courage, which is the CD, that valor, for the power to completely. So you must have great courage to lean into the power to completely surrender to another and to the universe. Think about that. Are we willing to do that? And so here's the thing. It's not like you need to be like, okay, yes, I'm going to do that, therefore everything is solved. That's not what I'm talking about. It's an opportunity to sit with and think about what that might look like and how that shows up for you, and being more mindful and intentional about what you're choosing inside that space. And so anyway, wanted to bring that to you today. Just a little tidbit. As I keep going down these rabbit holes or have these conversations, I just find this is so juicy. And I think it is just such a powerful way to take our personal power back by understanding the nuances in our own energy and understanding the ways we can get in our own way. Am I living in a space where the shadow energy has really taken over, or am I understanding that the shadow is helping me move into a space where I can stand in the innate gift, which is something that I get to share and put out and be of service to others? So just a little contemplation for you today. For those of you that jumped on, it was great to see you. I hope you're having a fantastic afternoon. Like I said, I've got some big announcements next week that I'm going to share with you, that if you would like to really understand human design on a much more granular level, really getting into the types, the energy, the channels, the lines, I'm going to be talking about a brand new space for you to do that. I've had a lot of people reach out that are not my one-on-one clients, wanting to know how to learn about my journey in human design and what I've been able to carry through. And so this is my interpretation of what I've learned after many rabbit hole deep dives over the last 5 years. And so stay tuned, because we're going to be announcing that Monday. And I'm super excited. This is like a whole different space to play in, and super juicy. So anyway, with that, hope you make it a great day. Happy Thursday, y'all. And I will catch up with y'all later on. So with that, bye.